Welcome to another episode of Wrestling Origins. This series will focus on one topic per video, such as a specific superstar, and detail their entire lives. You can think of this as sort of a biography, but somewhat condensed and in video format. This is going to be a long one, so get comfortable. Let's get into it. Dean Ambrose is a dangerous man. These are the exact words WWE uses to describe the Lunatic Fringe, and they are spot on. Ambrose has made a huge splash in the WWE as both a singles competitor and in a stable. His unique and entertaining character has pulled in tons of fans, and he's had a fairly successful career on the main roster. But what about before WWE? Today, we present Wrestling Origins, Dean Ambrose. Jonathan Good was born in December of 1985 in Cincinnati, Ohio. He lived primarily in Cincinnati's East End, where he spent most of his childhood in public housing. The neighborhood was full of violent crime and had a rampant drug problem. Suffice to say, this was not the ideal place for a child to grow up, let alone without the guidance of his parents. Due to these circumstances, John had to essentially raise himself, and struggled on a daily basis just to get by. In an interview, Good said that sometimes he would have to sell drugs in order to avoid a beating, while other times he had to stand up for himself and got pulverized. It wasn't an easy life, but he did what was necessary to survive in his harsh reality. John was a wrestling fan as a kid and absolutely idolized Bret Hart. He says that wrestling was an escape for him. It allowed him to put everything else aside for a minute. He immersed himself in wrestling VHS tapes that he would rent and read stories about the early days of the industry. John is also an avid fan of both the NFL and NHL, with his favorite teams being the Cincinnati Bengals and Philadelphia Flyers. However, when John discovered ECW, a hardcore wrestling promotion, his hobby turned into an obsession. He absolutely loved the chaotic, violent nature of ECW because it mimicked what he saw on a daily basis. This allowed him to connect with wrestling on a deeper level and essentially changed his life. At age 16, John discovered a flyer from a local wrestling promotion in Cincinnati called Heartland Wrestling Association, known simply as HWA. Here he attended his first ever live wrestling event and got his very first taste of the industry. Soon after, Good contacted the promoter, Les Thatcher, and showed interest in being trained. However, Thatcher turned him down, saying he should go to college first, get in better shape, and wait a few more years. However, Good was truly enamored with the sport at this point and didn't want to wait any longer. He decided to head down to the training facility and asked to be trained in person, but was once again refused since he was under the minimum age of 18. However, Thatcher did give John a job at HWA so he could get a taste of the business. Here, he did everything from selling popcorn to helping set up the ring. Thatcher himself maintained John wasn't ready to wrestle, but when he left HWA in 2003, Cody Hawk finally let John get in the ring. He trained at the Main Event Pro Wrestling Camp, one which produced the likes of Matt Striker, Jamie Noble, and Umaga. After approximately 1 year of training, John Good became known as John Moxley, and made his HWA debut in June of 2004 at just 18 years old, forsaking high school in the process. In just under a year, Moxley earned a title shot with then tag partner Jimmy Turner, forming the stable Necessary Roughness, and won the HWA Tag Team Championship in May of 2005 by defeating Extreme Desire. However, the duo lost the titles not too long after, which led Moxley to form a new partnership with Rick Byrne, which was called the Heartland Foundation. The foundation would go on to win the tag titles soon after, but were stripped of the belts the very same day. By 2006, John Moxley was back in singles competition, and in May of that year, Moxley beat Pepper Parks to win the HWA Heavyweight Championship. He would go on to hold that title for more than 4 months until he dropped it to Chad Collier, but regained it later in December. However, once again, Moxley would lose the title, this time just 3 days later to Brian Jennings. Moxley would go on to partner with his former trainer Cody Hawk to win the HWA Tag titles again in 2007, only to lose them 4 days later to GP Code. Moxley would continue to work in the tag team division until early 2010, winning the HWA Tag Team Championship twice in that time. He would also win the Heavyweight Championship for a third time in January of 2010, and would hold it until July of the same year. John Good has worked in a ton of independent wrestling promotions, such as Buckeye Pro Wrestling, Force One Pro Wrestling, Cleveland All Pro, and Jersey All Pro Wrestling, just to name a few. So I'm just going to go over some of the bigger ones here. In early 2006, Moxley actually wrestled for WWE, taking on WWE Tag Team Champions Joey Mercury and Johnny Nitro when he teamed up with Brad Taylor. Of course, they lost, but it was great exposure nonetheless. He would team up with Dick Rick later in 2006 as well to take on Big Show, but left with an 0-2 record. John was trying to branch out at this time and spent a decent while in IWA Puerto Rico. Here, he would be half of the British Militia. The Militia would win the IWA Puerto Rico tag titles in their third appearance. They would hold the titles until they lost in November of 2006, after which John changed his ring name briefly to Jonathan Moxley as he wrestled for the Intercontinental and Cruiserweight titles. John would also briefly become Moxley Mox for some strange reason. However, at this time, John was having issues with substance abuse. John had a mild drug problem since he was young, but as he grew older, the problem became a bit more severe. In an interview, he admitted to using cocaine, speed, alcohol, and marijuana over the course of his life. His personal problems led to a steep weight decline, one that IWA Puerto Rico refused to accept, dropping John from the promotion. Once he got back on his feet, John would return to the WWE in January of 2007 for a match against Val Venus on an episode of Heat. This appearance nearly netted John a spot in the WWE, but his dramatic weight loss became an issue and was sent away. Moxley had some great matches over in Insanity Pro Wrestling, where he won the Mid-America Championship on his second attempt in July of 2007. He would defend the title successfully a few times before losing it in October of that year. In 2007, Moxley also made a brief stint in Ring of Honor, competing in 2 matches. Unfortunately for John, around mid-2007, everything went south. His ties with WWE were severed at this point, and HWA, his original stomping grounds, all but closed its doors. His career came to a screeching halt, and he took a break from wrestling full-time for a whole year. When he finally returned, John had sorted out his personal demons and was ready to make an impact. He wrestled in a few more independent promotions, having more success and winning a few titles along the way. It was in 2009 that things really picked up for Moxley. Moxley would start working for both Dragon Gate USA and Combat Zone Wrestling, aka CZW. CZW is where John could prove his talent as a hardcore competitor. He was featured in CZW's 8th Tournament of Death, where he defeated Brain Damage in a Dining Death match, but lost in the semifinals in a Fans Bring the Weapons match. These were some very hardcore matches. In February of 2010, Moxley would defeat B-Boy to win the CZW World Heavyweight Championship, only to lose it and regain it twice in a 1-year period. Over in Dragon Gate USA, Moxley had most of his success in 2010. He had a notable matchup with partner Brian Kendrick against Paul London and Jimmy Jacobs. Also, likely a personal highlight of his career, Moxley stood across from Tommy Dreamer in 2010, where he would defeat him in a hardcore match. He would also face off against Bryan Danielson in September of 2010, but was unable to pick up the win. Skipping ahead to April of 2011, Moxley was released from Dragon Gate USA as John Good officially signed a developmental deal with WWE. He would join FCW, WWE's developmental promotion, under the new name of Dean Ambrose. In his televised FCW debut, Ambrose would challenge Seth Rollins. The two would have a fantastic feud, with their first match for the FCW 15 Championship. Rollins would retain the title after the 15-minute Iron Man match ended in a draw, as did the second one. The third match is where Rollins would decisively retain his title. Ambrose would continue his feud with Rollins, costing him a title match with Damien Sandow. He would later challenge Sandow for the FCW 15 title, but would be defeated. At an FCW house show in October, Ambrose would challenge CM Punk, who was making a guest appearance, only to lose in the 30-minute match. Ambrose would later have a memorable feud with FCW commentator William Regal, who he lost to. However, Dean would become obsessed, wanting a rematch with Regal. He would finally get it 1 year later, where he brutally beat down his opponent before being dragged off by multiple other superstars. After this, Dean was rarely seen for a solid few months. Let it be dark matches or even NXT live events, he very rarely made appearances. At the time, WWE said this was due to his unpredictability, but as it turned out, Dean was being groomed for something so much bigger. Dean would become part of The Shield. The Shield, made up of Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns, would debut in November of 2012 and would be a dominant force in the WWE for almost 2 years. They would attack WWE's top superstars and would thrive in 6-man tag matches, going undefeated for quite a while. In May of 2013, Ambrose would win the United States Championship, while his partners captured the tag team titles in the same night. Ambrose would hold his belt for a WWE record 351 days, but eventually lost it in a 20-man battle royal. Soon after, the Shield fell apart after Rollins betrayed his partners. After a few notable feuds and failed title attempts, Ambrose finally won the Intercontinental Championship from Kevin Owens in late 2015. He would hold on to it for 2 months till he lost it to Owens in a fatal 5-way match. Since then, Ambrose has feuded with Triple H, Brock Lesnar, and most recently Chris Jericho at WWE Extreme Rules in 2016. Oh, and he's been dating Renee Young for a while now too. And there you have it, the complete origins of Dean Ambrose. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also be sure to suggest superstars for future Wrestling Origins videos. As always, thank you for watching.